Weisshorn. The Weisshorn, German, lit. White Peak/Mountain, is a major peak of Switzerland and the Alps, culminating at 4,506 meters, 14,783 feet, above sea level. It is part of the Pennine Alps and is located between the valleys of Anniviers and Zermatt and the canton of Valais. In the latter valley, the Weisshorn is one of the many 4,000 earths surrounding Zermatt, with Monte Rosa and the Matterhorn. The Weisshorn was first climbed in 1861 from Ronda by the Irish physicist John Tyndall, accompanied by the guides J.J. Benin and Ulrich Wenger. Nowadays, the Weisshorn hut is used on the normal route. The Weisshorn is considered by many mountaineers to be the most beautiful mountain in the Alps in Switzerland for its pyramidal shape and pure white slopes. In April and May 1991, 2 consecutive rockslides took place from a cliff above the town of Ronda on the east side of the massif, below the Bisque Glacier. Geography. The Weisshorn is situated in the southern canton of Valais, about 25 kilometers southwards from the Rhone between Sierre and Visp. It is the culminating point on the north-south orientated chain separating the Val d'Anniviers to the west and the Matterhorn to the east and enclosing the Turbmantle to the north, the tripling between these valleys being located just north of its main summit. The Weisshorn faces the slightly higher dome across the Matterhorn, with the village of Ronda 3,100 meters below these two summits. After the dome, the Weisshorn is the second highest alpine summit situated completely out the main chain and fully within Switzerland. On both sides of the Weisshorn range, the water end up in the Rhone, through the Navesins, west, and the Vispa, east. The Weisshorn and the Dome are only two of the many 4,000-meter peaks surrounding the region of Zermatt, along with the Zeno-Rothorn, the Dent Blanche, the Dent Thierrens, the Matterhorn and, second highest in the Alps, Monte Rosa. The Weisshorn has a pyramidal shape and its faces are separated by 3 ridges descending steeply from the summit. 2 of these are nearly in a straight line, one running approximately north and the other south. The third ridge is nearly at right angles to these 2, running almost due east. In the compartment between the northern and eastern spurs lies the Bisque Glacier, Weissgletscher. It is connected with the summit by long and extremely steep slopes of snow. In the compartment between the eastern and southern spurs lies the Scaly Glacier, Schilliggletscher. Ranges of steep rocks rise round the whole basin of this glacier, except in 1 or 2 places where they are interrupted by couloirs of snow. Finally, on the western side the mountain presents one gigantic face of rocky precipice. This face rises above the Weisshorn Glacier, Glacier du Weisshorn, and the Mulming Glacier. The northern spur forks out at a considerable distance below the summit into 2 branches enclosing the Turtman Glacier. The eastern branch connects the mountain with the Bischorn, 4,153 meters, across the Weisshornjoch. Geology. The Weisshorn is the culminating point of the Dent Blanche Nappe, a cliff belonging to the Austro-Alpine Nappes. The mountain is composed of gneisses. The west face is also composed of sedimentary rocks from the Cretaceous period. Climbing history. The mountain was first climbed on August 19, 1861 by the 29-year-old physicist John Tyndall, with guides J.J. Benin and Ulrich Wenger. Their itinerary corresponds to the normal route for climbing the mountain today, the East Ridge, starting from the Weisshorn hut. 1860 attempt. In 1860 an attempt was made by C. Matthews by the southern face. He came to Zermatt with Melchior Anderegg, and engaged Johann Kronig as second guide. They slept at the huts of Schallenberg Alp and started at 1:30 on the morning of 1st of July. Crossing the moraine, they walked until they reached a steep and rugged portion of the glacier, which hid the mountain from their view, and rounding this obstruction with some difficulty, they reached the upper portion of the glacier about 5 o'clock. They saw that the ridges were thickly coated over with fresh snow, and, except a little patch of rock some 700 or 800 feet, 240 meters, below the summit, the whole mass was of brilliant and dazzling whiteness. They decided to try the southern side, which seemed less steep and more practicable to Melchior, but an avalanche stopped them. For 6 mortal hours we toiled up the steep face of the mountain. A great many steps had to be cut, but for the most part we were able to tread out our footholds in the snow. About 9:30 the difficulties became much greater. 10 or 12 inches of snow rested upon the ice. We could not get safe footing upon it, and my clinometer indicated an angle of 48 or 49 degrees. The necessity of clearing away the snow before the step could be cut in the ice beneath it, made Melchior's work very arduous, and the higher we got the greater the difficulties became. We had to take off veil and spectacles, and use all our eyes. The footholds were so insecure, and this, though the sun was extremely hot and there was not a cloud to be seen. Suddenly the heat of the sun loosened some snow just above us, and down came a little avalanche quite near enough to be exceedingly unpleasant. The guide Kronig asked Matthews to give up the expedition. They turned back and reached Zermatt in the evening, after 19 hours of walking. They experienced other avalanches on the descent and the eyes of Matthews were severely burnt. First ascent. Accompanied by the guides J.J. Bennen, of Valais, and Ulrich Wenger, of Grindelwald, John Tyndall started the ascent from Ronda at 1 p.m. on August 18, 1861. They had a bivouac and resumed the climb at 3:35 a.m. on the next day. Tyndall was optimistic but the ascent became difficult, he wrote. Sometimes it was a fair pull upwards, sometimes an oblique twist round the corner of a rock tower, sometimes it was the grip of the finger ends in a fissure and lateral shifting of the whole body in a line parallel to the crack. Many times I found myself with my feet highest and my head lowest. They reached a dangerous thin ridge of snow, little wider than a hand's breadth, with precipices on either side. The guide Bennen trod the snow down and saw that it was firm enough to cross. Tyndall and Wenger followed Bennen, but yet the summit seemed less attainable and they were all tired. However, Tyndall steeled himself with patriotic thoughts. I thought of Englishmen in battle, of the qualities which had made them famous. It was mainly the quality of not knowing when to yield, of fighting for duty even after they had ceased to be animated by hope. Such thoughts helped to lift me over the rocks. After 4 hours of struggle they reached a sharp ridge of snow and finally arrived to the summit. The return was found to be not much less difficult than the ascent, and they regained Ronda at 11 p.m., after about 20 hours of almost constant hard work. Other ascents. The second ascent, in 1862, was made by Leslie Stephen. Starting with Melchior Anderegg and Franz Beiner, of Zermatt. It was from a chalet below the Schallenberg Alp, nearly 2 hours lower than Tyndall's bivouac, that Stephen gained the highest point in 9.5 hours, and returned to Ronda in 7.5 hours more, reaching Zermatt the same evening. In 1877, another route was opened by W. E. Davidson, J. W. Hartley and H. S. Hoare, with guides P. Ruby, J. 1 and A. Pullinger. After climbing part of the lower southeast face above the Scully Glacier, they reached the Schleigrit, southwest ridge, and continued to the summit. The complete ridge, which was considered too difficult and dangerous in its lower part, was first climbed in 1895 by J. M. Beener, A. M. Bowden and E. Broom. The southeast face was completely climbed in 1906 by Geoffrey Winthrop Young and R. G. Mayer with the guide Joseph Nobel of St. Niklaus in the canton Valais. The glaciated northeast face was first climbed in 1871 by J. H. Kitson with guides Christian Almayer and his son. Almayer wanted to reach the summit by 9 o'clock in the morning while Kitson's wife watched them from the Gornergrot. In fact, the difficulties were more serious than expected and they didn't reach the summit before midday. Shortly after, the ascent was repeated by W. A. B. Coolidge and Meta Brevoort. Both expeditions climbed the part of the face below the Grand Gendarme and continued near the North Ridge. In 1909 G. W. Young and J. Nobel climbed the face by the Central Spur. The west face was first climbed in 1879 by G. A. Passingham with guides F. M. Zeng and L. Zurbrücken. Other routes on the face were opened in 1883 and 1889. The easiest passage on the east face was found in 1890 by G. W. Young, who climbed the spur under the Grand Gendarme with L. and B. Détaz by a route known as the Jungrat. The summit of the Grand Gendarme on the unexplored North Ridge was first reached in 1898. 1 month later, on September 21, 1898, H. Billy and H. Berginer made the first complete traverse on the North Ridge to the summit from the Weisshorn. In 1888 George Winkler was killed in a fall on the west face. He left Thanel alone on 17th of August, without telling others his precise route. The rescue team only found a photo and a hat near an avalanche cone. His body was not found until the summer of 1956, on the Weisshorn Glacier. John Norforth Cocking was also killed making a solo attempt on the southeast face 12 years later. In 1925 Eleanor Noel Clever, H. Fan and H. Trier were caught in an avalanche on the northeast face when they tried to reach the East Ridge after interrupting their ascent on the North Ridge on account of adverse weather conditions. Fan and Trier survived, but Clever died from asphyxiation. 1983 helicopter crash. An Alouette 3 helicopter from Air Zermatt crashed on a night flight on the Scully Glacier, south of the peak, on July 31, 1983. The helicopter was carrying the pilot, his assistant and a mountain guide who was searching for two missing alpinists. A false alarm made the pilot try to land the helicopter on the glacier at 3,160 meters. All the crew were severely injured, but the guide and pilot survived. The two missing alpinists were later found dead. Climbing routes. All the routes are difficult. The normal route starts from the Weisshorn hut on the east side and goes along the sharp east ridge. The Weisshorn can be climbed from the Bischorn via the north ridge, departing from the Cabane to Traket, above Zinal. The first 3 hours consist of relatively easy walking across the glacier and lead to the summit of the Bischorn, 4,153 meters. The second part of the ascent is very exposed and takes another 5 hours, during which the Grand Gendarme must be climbed.